Yes,
All right.
it's running perfect.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
I've been in the industry for, well, the better part of 30 years now. And
Wow.
technology has changed. It always has changed. And yes, we are now at changing a bit faster than we used to. But I think it's always good to keep an eye on things that are evolving. And that's what this session is also about. And that's what I would love you to focus on. It's an introduction. I'm not going to do a deep dive, but simply go in the session with an open mind and see what it could do for you.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, for setting the expectation. So the audience, I'll be handing over the floor to Johan right now. Stay tuned. Please, if you have questions, feel free to use the chat section. I'll be on the background. I and Florence will be on the background to respond to your questions. Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
Johan, over to you.
And at the
Okay,
end of
go
the
ahead.
session, there will be some time for question and answering. We only
Yeah.
have a small group, so I don't even mind if you really think, well, okay, I can't understand it. Simply, if you want, you can come off mute and simply ask it. I'm fine with that. It's
Okay.
for sharing information. That's the most part of it. As long as it's not hindering the talk, I'm quite fine with simply opening up the channel for questions and discussions. Okay, that
Thank
being
you.
said, let's simply dive into this topic because we do have a lot to do. And now I'll simply move this one out of the way. That's the downside of doing it in screen sharing. I'm not quite sure, and that's the difficult part. Normally, I would love to give talks for on premises because then it's easier to interact with people. But so I'm not quite sure how many of you are doing things like agentic coding. I do see it a lot in the industry. I do work for different clients, and I do see different companies adopting agentic coding to actually help their developers in their development workflow, which is fine. On the other hand, I don't see that many vibe codings still happening in companies. But if you look at social media, you do see a lot of vibe coding, especially for all kinds of indie companies happening. People with an ID start vibe coding their own product and shipping it to the market and hoping to sell some money from it. Okay, very good examples on what you can do with AI to speed up your development process. But in my personal opinion, there are some problems with these approaches. The requirements of a system are not documented, and that doesn't have to do especially with vibe coding or agentic coding. I know that there's a problem with that in all kinds of agile processes as well. But in agile processes, you normally still have your user stories to work on. What will happen if I only have my working product? I see my working product, I want it to change, and I change it on the fly by simply prompting my LLM to do something else. Okay, that's fine, and the application will definitely change, but the requirements will never be documented. And there's also a problem with the requirements. If you don't document them, you can't validate them. And I'm not quite sure about you, but I've worked with a lot of customers, and if I simply go over the requirements with them, it's fine. And if you really look at the requirements and you do have a critical mind, you probably will see that things sometimes contradict, that they're not clear, that we are missing information. And that is difficult because if information is missing, we as developers, we as IT people start making assumptions. The best way to do it probably would be, not leave out a probably, will simply be go back to the customer and ask. But I know a lot of development teams simply don't like that, so they make assumptions. And so the requirements that are documented are not really the requirements that are implemented. And there's even a bigger problem at the moment when you start using Gen AI for this, because you will make assumptions, but if you're not quite explicit, the LLM will start making assumptions for you as well. And assumptions plus assumptions could be quite a difficult and dangerous thing. I'm not blind to vibe coding. I'm not blind to agentic coding. I do it all day long. But if I compare the code understanding that I have for building a certain product, and if I compare that to the understanding that I have for a product I built 2 years ago, well, handwriting all the code gives you a very high understanding of the code. And generating lots of it will give you a low code understanding. But I don't understand the code that well. I don't understand the requirements that well. So that does sound like a maintainability risk for me on the long term, because let's be honest, we don't write software simply to be used next week and then terminated. Yes, there are systems that are being used for marketing, just fine. Go with the vibe coding approach. You don't need to maintain it on a long term. Most systems that I am involved with should last 10, 15 years.
Let's go.
Maintainability is definitely a problem. But what is the key problem? If maintainability is a problem, well, in agentic and vibe coding, we're still focusing on the low-level parts of the application system. We don't look at the high-end requirements. We don't look at non-functionals. We simply say, well, okay, we're in this screen. I want this thing to change. So implementation is accelerated, but product understanding definitely is not. And product understanding is a thing that will make a product better in the long run to be maintained. But what if we could focus on the product understanding instead of our code, and the code gets more to be like an artifact? Well, that's where spec-driven development comes into play. And when I was prepping this meeting, I thought, well, okay, there's a lot of definitions going around spec-driven development. And I thought, well, okay, I don't want this vendor-specific one. I want one that's at least being supported by a broader part of the industry. So I looked at Gartner and I thought, well, okay, what does Gartner have to say about spec-driven development? Well, it's all about readable specifications by humans, but also by machine. They should be unambiguous. Well, if you ever worked with a requirements engineer, you know that every specification should be unambiguous if it's being used by a human or by a machine. And what will this allow us to do to shift the bottleneck from manual coding to not the code itself, but more to planning, architecture, and writing clear executable contracts? You can read of this, the specifications. And why would this be important? Well, to be honest, if I look at my day-to-day job, about half my time I spend coding. The other half I spend talking to IT about the architecture, how we're going to deploy it, talk to my customer about specifications that are not clear. And for all these things, AI does not help me yet. But what if I could have AI help me so that my 50% would be AI supported, the other would be supported, so that would give a more focus and will enhance the speed of my development capacity. Okay, and that's where we need tools for. And if you look at the desire to do spec-driven development, that's not new. Because I've been in the industry for too many years. I've seen a lot of things being tried and failed. There has been a desire to do spec-driven development for many, many years. And things like the rational unified process that happened, well, I think about 15 years ago or something like that, with RUP, and there was rational rows. Then you could simply design your system, and the promise was by the designs we could generate the code, and that would be it. It never worked because the tooling was not powerful enough. But nowadays, in the time frame of AI, our tooling does get better. And Gen AI can help us a lot with, well, at least everything that's in written text. Okay, so there are a lot of tools available at the moment for spec-driven development. And I would say Google searched it, but that's last year's. So we always search, at least I searched for this using a Gen AI, and I ask it, well, okay, what kind of tooling is there on the market at the moment for spec-driven development? And it did a web crawl, and it came up with, well, a few tools. And GitHub Spec Kit is one of them. I don't say in this talk that GitHub Spec Kit is the best. It's only the one that I have played around with the most. So that's where I do get some information and some thought about how it works. All the others might work quite as well, but I'm not in the industry of speccing out different tools. So we're going to focus on GitHub Spec Kit. And what is it all about? Well, it's an open source toolkit that will allow you to focus on the product scenarios. It's on GitHub, so you can actually look at it. And what you will see, and what I do want to make quite explicit, it is a pre-release. It's not production yet. So I do play around with it, but I don't use it in production yet because it's not fully stable. And that's in the era of AI quite normal that you start working with products that have not reached the 1.0 yet. But I also do have a responsibility towards my customers that I don't want to lock them into a certain product that may change over time a lot or even not be released. Okay, but let's simply look at SpecKit and open up the website. Simply drop this one because it's not in the way, and welcome to SpecKit. It's all open source, and what you will see, it really is actively being maintained. It's not a thing that Microsoft launched and does nothing with. There's a lot of activity on the tool. And what you might think, it's all around spec-driven development. And the good thing is, there's also a lot of documentation. That's what some of the open source tooling lacks a bit. Good documentation. Well, there's a lot of documentation for GitHub Spec Kit. So you can really get started with it. And one of the cool things that I like about it, and that's what it really means to be open source, of course, there are community products that will expand and enhance this toolkit. So it really is also supported by the community. It's not just a thing from Microsoft, or GitHub, but it's really being supported by the community as well. One thing that you do need to get started, that is that you do need to have Python installed. So I do have to, with the UV tool, I do have to specify the CLI. Like a lot of Microsoft products, they all revolve around CLIs at the moment. Of course, it's easy. CLIs work great with LLMs, so quite understandable that they are focusing on CLIs. But you do have to install the CLI. But don't worry, I'm not going to show you a lot of things on the command line. There's a very good integration in Visual Studio Code, so that's what we are going to use. Okay, back to the presentation. When I was prepping this, I thought, well, okay, the best way to show you what spec-driven development is all about is simply to build an app. And when I was working on that idea, I thought, well, okay, I can create the next forms over data, but that's not that interesting. Let's do a thing a bit more challenging. Let's build a game together. And we're not going to build the next 3D first-person shooter or driving game. That's not it. But there are a lot of retro games that could be a good one. So I thought, well, okay, what are the nice things to play? Well, and I thought, well, what are we going to do? We are going to build a single-player ping-pong game. Okay. Before we can do that, we do need to initialize a project. So we've got the CLI installed. We do create a directory. We need to initialize the project. And all we have to do is actually get the command specify init, specify the project name, and specify which coding agent I want to use. In this case, I'm specifying for Copilot, but don't think that you can't use other ones. These are the available agents. So you can use OpenCode, you can use Quen, you can use Juni, because I do use a lot of JetBrains products as well. So Juni is perfect, Claude you can use. So there are a lot of agents that you can choose from. Okay, but what does initialize do? Well, let's simply find out. I've got a new project here. We are going to open up a folder, and I always put things in my projects. So let's go to, where are my projects? Oh, there's my projects. I'll simply create a new folder and do it in session Malta. Okay, perfect. Open it up. Go to my terminal. Trust it. Perfect. Because what I'm now going to do is I am going to actually initialize this. What does it do? Okay, it will ask what kind of shell do you want to use? Well, perfect, going to use the normal shell. And I'm going to switch to the folder that gets created, because otherwise things won't work. So what I'm going to do, simply switch to this directory. Okay. And what you will see, I'll simply move this out of the way. You do get a number of folders created. The GitHub, where you probably are quite familiar with agents. Hey, SpecKit, this looks a lot. And prompts. There's a specify folder. There's VS Code. But this is SpecKit. There's not a hidden executable. It's all around custom agents, custom prompts, and that's everything. So if you want to get a real information on what SpecKit does under the hood, you simply can start investigating, for instance, well, the clarify agent. So I can go through all the steps it does, all the descriptions it does. So it's quite open source and quite open on the things that it is doing. Okay. And that's what I like. It's easy, relatively. Okay. Okay, after initialization, we can start actually building with the project. And in SpecKit terms, that does come down to at least 5 steps. we do have to come up with a constitution. We do have to specify what we want. We do have to make a plan out of it. We do have to create tasks from that one, and we do have to implement them. And this looks like a linear process, but in practice, it is not. Because if I'm, for instance, in the plan part and I think, well, okay, the specification is not right, I'll simply update the specification and do it again. So you will see that this isn't a linear process. This is quite an iterative process, but it does give you a bit of a good understanding on all the different steps that at least need to be taken. Okay, let's go one by one. First things you do normally when you start a new project is, of course, think about what are the specific things for a project that everything in the project should adhere to. What I like to call, most likely, the non-functional requirements. So what does every aspect of my application needs? Well, that's what the constitution comes to. And for this application, I thought, well, okay, what kind of constitution are we going to use? Well, I love clean coding. I love test-driven development. So that's principles that I do want to adhere to. Do want Yachny. I do want to focus on usability. And very importantly, because that's what I hear from a lot of end users, please don't let the user interface look AI generated. Because, well, let's be honest, that's, of course, part of being an AI, coming up with variations on the same theme. Well, end users do see that the user interface got AI generated. But then again, primarily I'm a backend developer. I think they like it a lot more than that I let my front end be AI generated than I do it myself, because that really doesn't look nice. Okay, what happens if we are using this command? Well, let's simply find out in the... Then I do have to copy over the command, and I'm going to do that from another terminal. Okay, let's simply run it. And hope I anticipated that GitHub Copilot will be fast enough to do this interactively. And if not, I always have a plan B for... I did record all the steps so that we can go over them if we need to. In the meantime, that it's generating, I now put it on the auto mode, and you can use a lot of auto mode when you're using SpecKit. Okay, just wait for it. Probably will take a bit of time. It's reading things that are part of the memory, because SpecKit, and that's the good part of it, uses memory files. So what you will see in the specify folder, there's a lot of memory files. So it's easy to simply start working on a project, shut down the machine, leave for home, come back in the next day and pick up where you left off. Just see. Just give it a few seconds, and otherwise one file changed, analyzing. Let me see how far it got. Okay, so it's all around Markdown, like all the other AI stuff. I haven't seen that much Markdown since AI got popular, but these are my principles. Test-driven development, non-negotiable. So what does it mean? Contract first models, clean code as a feature, the repository pattern that got Yachny by default. Usability, technology, that should not be part of this one. Sorry about that, guys. I messed up. I did it in the wrong one, but that's fine. What I'll do is I'll have it run here. And in the meantime, what I'll do, I will show you the one that is already part of the ping pong game. Okay, this is my finished one where you will see the core principles around test-driven development, clean code, YACNI, some delivery standards, the development workflow, all focused around test-driven development, some governance, and very important, there is some versioning. And why is that important? Because if I change my constitution, every aspect of the things coming after it should be rechecked if they still adhere to the constitution. Okay, so far the constitution. Let's simply look at how far the other one is going, analyzing. Okay, simply jump back to the presentation and see where it will pick it up later on. This is the one we saw. Okay, if I've got my non-functionals ready, I can start specifying the functional things that I want to do. And that means that I do have to think about the functionality. And yes, I could put a prompt in with the entire functionality of an entire application. I would advise you to split it up in functional units anyway, because otherwise probably even SpecKit is not able to do this for you. But you are going to work on functional specifications. That does mean that you do have to provide detail. And more detail than you might think, because we all make assumptions. And I will show you that on the prompt that I will show you. Do not add technical details to specify, because if you do, you will receive an error. There is a check on that one. So if you do so, specify will simply say, we're not going to accept it. And this is what I mean about adding detail. It's a single user ping pong game. This is the prompt. And after about 3 to 4 tries, I started out way simpler. Simply by single using ping pong game, the scores must be kept, and I do want to use the up and down arrow. Because, let's be honest, in my assumption, when the ball bounces back or reaches the end of the playing field, it should bounce back. Well, the AI didn't understand that, because that's an assumption that I made based on the knowledge that I have of the ping pong game. And you should be quite specific. The first version started automatically. So I do specify, okay, when do I want the game to start? And when do I want the game to stop? And how long do I want the game to last? So you should be quite specific on the things that you want to achieve. Okay, let's see how far my... Yeah, perfect. Now it's already there. Let's give this one to the correct version of GitHub. Okay, here we go. And it's reading all the things, some extension hooks. This is great. I don't know if you can see this good, but there's a feature branch. What SpecKit automatically does is it's now on the main branch, but it thinks, well, okay, that's not a good thing to do. So for every spec that you make, you do get a specific feature branch, which is, of course, great, because then that means that you can experiment with a certain feature. If you like it, you can merge it back. If you don't like it, well, simply throw it away. Just see what it does. Look results. Specify is already coming. Just give it a sec. In the meantime, I can check if there are any questions in the No, there are no questions there yet. You can see that two files are being built up. One is the requirements, which is really a checklist of the things that it should do coming up with a specification. And now the spec is already ready. So I'll simply say keep it. Because what we will see, my original input, which I really, really like, because let's be honest, especially if you're working on a team, what prompt did my colleague use when coming up with a specification? And this way, it's quite apparent because it's simply part of my SpecMD. This entire input has been split up into 3 user stories: playing a timed match, the recording of the scores, and the recent and best results. And what I like about this is there are acceptance criteria with the given when then syntax automatically generated. That's what I expect when I start working on an agile project. Reality is, in a lot of projects where I work on, I only have the user story description, and that's all. I don't have any acceptance criteria. I don't have any acceptance scenarios. So what does it mean? When is a thing ready? Well, quite apparent here. What also is here is the edge cases. So you can read the edge cases that the LLM came up with, and you can easily change them if you want to. And one of the cool things that I like, which I really don't see that much in agile systems, is a split up in functional requirements. And what does this allow us to do? To simply hook up the different things to functional requirements so that we can make sure that everything that we've got specified also gets implemented. So traceability for this one is great. There's UX requirements. There are already some things about the entities that we probably will need to store this. There are measurable outcomes. So what can we observe? When will it be right? And quite importantly, the assumptions that the LLM made when generating this specification are documented as well, which I don't see happening a lot in human-generated things because we are quite bad at documenting our own assumptions. And there's some guardrails. And what you can see in the requirements, every step has been checked. If you read through this document and you think, well, okay, things are missing, at least through the spec, you can, of course, start reprompting, or when it's a simple thing, you can simply edit this file. There's nothing that keeps you from editing this file directly, because this will be your starting point for the next phase. And what will be the next phase? Well, let's go back to PowerPoint. Get you out of the way. We don't need that one because that's what you already saw. The next phase is actually an optional phase. Because I didn't include it in the 5 steps. According to the official SpecKit documentation, it is optional. But I really, really would recommend you not to make it optional, but to really do this. Because writing requirements is quite hard. And getting them right is also quite hard. But making sure that giving it an extra validation step is quite a good thing to do. And SpecKit can do that for you. So please let SpecKit do this, because the better your requirements, the better the outcome in the end of the product that you designed. So let's simply do that. So what we are going to do, well, there's even here what you will see. All the custom agents are linked. One agent will say, well, okay, I can hand off to these and these other agents. Sometimes you can simply hit the button and simply say, well, I want to clarify. Sometimes you do have to give it a real prompt and then the button is there, but I prefer to do it then in the box. But clarify my requirements. What this does is really analyzing the requirements, and if it finds things that are not in order or that needs some more specification from the customer, the user, it will start asking questions about features. Well, this is, for instance, one. How should the score be calculated during the 60-second session? Well, simply, well, there are some options. Increase the score when it hits, over time, and it also provides you with the recommended answer. Well, let's go for the recommended answer. Captured, it will update the spec for that one, as you can see happening here. Comes up with another one. Do I want to? Well, I'll simply go for the recommended option. Each run of Clarify probably will give you 4, max 5 questions at a time. If you get a lot of questions and you think, well, okay, I'm not quite sure if everything is now all right, there's nothing that keeps you from running the Clarify once again until you are quite confident that all the missing pieces in the requirements are fulfilled. Okay, it's coming up with another one. Just seeing how far we are now. Option A. And giving the number of questions that I now get from Clarify, in a normal process, I would run the clarification process at least once more, just to make sure that I have got everything ready, because it's still an LLM and it can now say, well, it's resolved, it's clear. You probably will see that if you run it again, it will come up with other questions. The frustrating part it's still a non-deterministic system. It can as well be that you do the specification, you do the clarification, and for the same spec, you get, at least the prompt, you get either 5 questions or none, depending on the run that you do. That's a bit of the non-deterministic part of it, but that's working with an LLM. Okay. That was the optional part. And then we can start working with how do we want to build it? And that can be quite frustrating if you're a developer. This is the only part where you can start thinking about technical details. All the other things are functional things. That doesn't mean that you have to do the other parts as a developer, for instance. If you have got an requirements engineer on your team, well, quite happy that that person can do the first 2 phases. Please let him do that and ask a technical guy, come to the developer for the planning phase. As well as the other steps, you should be quite specific here. This is the plan that I used. I wanted to use .NET 10 Blazor. I'm a .NET guy. I want to use WebAssembly. I want to use the render mode. I want to use browser local storage. I like clean, so I want to have a clean architecture. I want to have it testing, and I want Playwright to do the end-to-end testing. Okay. What will happen if I do this? Simply, then I keep a close eye on this one. Technical plan. Double checking that I'm in the correct one. Yes, and push you out of the way. First hit the keep here and then let it build out the plan. And as you probably can see, it looks a lot like what you normally would do in a software development project. Anyway, I will come up with the non-functionals. I will talk to my customer, come up with the functional specs, and based on the functional specs, I will come up with a certain architecture, because I do want my architecture to fit the functional needs. And let's see what it's doing. Okay, I think that I know what's going on. Oh no, it's still working. Let's give it a sec to see if it's... Okay, identity plan MD. Placeholder. So what you see now here is my plan is being generated, but there's also some research being done. So it's looking at the UI stack, how should it work? It's looking at some architecture patterns, some score persistency, some testing strategies for how about the time in scoring, how about the timestamp, top scoring. Even on other runs, I saw that it was thinking about, for instance, how to implement a game loop in Blazor. Because, well, let's be honest, that's nowhere documented. And now my plan should be ready. Let's simply run the keep. Yeah. Here you will see everything. So what will be my source code generation? What will be my structures? What will be my data model with a lot of specifications on the fields and the types? What are my contracts? Okay, not that interesting. Already showed you the research, and see what it comes up with. It didn't change anything in the spec. Okay, there's one thing to do after that. I do have my technical plan ready, and also that is a thing that you normally would do in a software development project. At least most of the time I'm a lead developer. So once I have my architecture plan ready, I split it up in tasks. Well, the same goes for SpecKit. So what I'm going to do is simply hit here, create tasks. I don't need to specify anything. It knows enough about all the things in the memory to run this phase. And normally this shouldn't take too long. And I'm keeping an eye on the time that you do have some time for questions. Just double checking the chats. Nope, don't see any questions there yet. Okay, so let's come up with task MD. I think it's almost ready. Yeah, perfect. Okay. This is what it came up with. It split up the entire technical plan into different phases. Well, shared infrastructure phase, the foundational, and then the user stories. Okay, quite normal, foundational, setting up my infrastructure. So everything gets a task number as well. And you will see, okay, I have to create a solution. I have to add some projects to it. I do have to create some foundational things before I can even start working. And now the cool part is, if you look at this one, for instance, it does already specify that these function pieces, these tasks can run in parallel. That's what the P stands for. So it already makes an assumption. What do I need to build sequentially? And what can I do run in parallel to simply speed up the generation process? Okay. And there's even the dependencies being nicely specified, which tasks are being run. So it's really well documented how you get from specifications to the tasks. And the fortunate thing, it's all in Markdown, so you can always refer back to it. Okay. Now, if you have the tasks, now comes the time where you can actually say, well, okay, I am going. Yeah, let's do this one. That's an optional step. Before I want to start implementing my code, I want to make sure that everything's okay. That tasks are linked to functionality, and there's no functionality without a task. So we can run an optional analyze step. Let's do that before we show you the code gen. This is always difficult, double checking what will come out of it, because it's still an LLM and the outcome is quite unpredictable. Normally this task doesn't take too long, so I'm quite willing to wait for it for a minute or two. Double checking for the meeting chat, nothing there. Loading up. And what you may see, I don't know if you have noticed it, but I did mention in the beginning that there should be a feature branch. Apparently, the LLM missed to create a feature branch, or it failed at least in it. So I'm still working on the main branch. Okay. What you will see is there are some things around alignment. Well, there are some critical things, there are some high severity things, some medium things, some low things. And here is my code coverage, my feature coverage, which is quite nice to have. So what I normally would do is start fixing these analysis things. So actually making sure that I do have to update my spec, for instance, or the plan, so that it really, or the tasks, that it really will function. Given the time, we're not going to do that. We're going to move to the next step, because I do want to show you the implement part. The implement part I will show you in a pre-recorded way. Why? What I'm going to show you in a minute was a process that lasts about 40 minutes. So I've got everything in place. I'll simply say, well, start implementing the software. And what you will see is it starts generating a lot. You will see there's a source directory, there's a test directory. So a lot of information is being generated. What I would definitely would advise you to put this in either an auto mode, or at least an accept tool calls mode. When I recorded this video, that was not available in Visual Studio Code yet, so that's why you don't see it. But now you can see that a lot of information gets generated. Okay. Let's see what actually got generated. I'll simply hop over to Visual Studio Code. No, I don't want you to go there. Where are you here? Is this the one? Yeah, this is the one. So what you will see, and I'm not quite sure if you're familiar with the clean architecture, doesn't really matter that much for this talk, but you will see that it generated 4 different class libraries for the different things. So there's my domain with my entities and my value objects. There's my application with some interfaces. I even have my infrastructure with my repository, and I've got my web application with the game. Okay. And if you look at the tests, because I did force it to do end-to-end testing, of course, there's my game engine tests, and there's my end-to-end test for this. And personally, I'm quite happy with this, because if you, for instance, look at the unit test, you might think, well, okay, I don't see any tests being generated for the value objects. Well, I don't want tests to be generated for value objects because, well, Microsoft will do a good thing in testing their own stuff, and I don't have to do that in a custom project. Now, of course, will it run? Well, let's simply run it and see what we created in a very short time. Okay, it's running. Let's open it up. And let's hit the start button. And now you probably will see it's quite fast. Well, I'm not that good at playing ping pong anymore. And what you will see is the integrated browser that does behave sometimes a bit strange compared to the regular browser. But that's fine. It simply gives you an idea of the gameplay. And I'm quite bad at it. Okay. Well, simply let's run it for some seconds. And what you will see here are the top scores. So push it aside. What about changes? Because I'm a developer, and if I want to change something, well, it would be quite tempting to simply say, well, okay, I start updating the code. You should really not have that temptation. Update the specifications, update the tasks, make sure that you work in a traceable way. And that really is a bit different for a developer, but that's a way where you do have to adhere to if you want to really do spec-driven development. What about brownfield code? Can you use it? Well, definitely you can. And I hope I didn't mess up my demo, because what I have done, tasks MD, up, Sports Club. What you can do is you can, in an existing project, you can, for instance, use this specify init with the dash here, so you don't specify a project, with the integration, so which AI agent do I want to use. And what I did in this existing project was simply say, well, okay, you know what? I want to have an undo. Yes, because then I will see the correct one. I want the constitution to be generated. And what I said, well, okay, you know what? I want the current information, the current functionality, I want that to be documented as well. And part of that one, of course, I can create a plan. Part of that one, I can create my tasks. So I do get an entire build-up specification on a current version of the system. How about customizations? Can I customize it? Well, definitely you can. You may be tempting, because I did show you the markdown files and the custom agents. Once you start with the init, you might think, well, okay, I'm simply going to change that one. Well, I would advise against that. And why is that? Because you don't have to. If you go to the documentation, there is some information what you can do if you want to customize SpecKit to your own local needs. There are some local overrides. There are some presets and extensions. You can add new capabilities through extensions. And only in the last step, if you have got no other alternative, you can simply update the markdown files. But if you start doing that, you will get into trouble with new versions. And as you can see, there's still a lot of active development, and it would be difficult to actually merge all the new things in your own changed templates. So I really go for the first three.
Hi, John.
Yeah?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Is there a way you can share the link? Is there a link to share with the audience to the SpecKit documentation?
Oh, sure. Not a problem at all.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll simply, now I have to double check if I have that one, and I'll put it in the chat. Yes. That's the one. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You're more than welcome. Okay, and now the difficult part, token usage. If you had asked me 2 months ago, I would say, well, okay, not a problem at all. I was on premium requests, and I never had a problem with the number of premium requests at the end of the month. Since the beginning of June, of course, GitHub Copilot changed its billing model to token-based usage. And for the project that I work on, I already added money to the budget 3 times, simply not to overrun my budget. But how about token usage? Well, I wasn't sure. So what I did last week is simply do a test run. So on June 23rd, I did everything that I showed you from beginning to end. And this cost me 487 credits with $4 in usage. And if I look at what I got, I could not have built such a game in Blazor in only an hour and a half, or not even. I think that the entire thing costs me around 40, 50 minutes or so. So having to pay $4 for saving me a few days of work, I think it's a good business opportunity. So don't worry too much about it. And of course, it does depend on the model that you choose. I did put it on auto select, of course. If you do everything with the greatest Opus model, you probably will pay a bit more than I have shown you here. Since we are almost in the hour, and I'm not quite sure how long people have reserved it, and I don't want to overrun too much. If I look at this, I think it's a quite usable approach for specifically new apps. Still don't like it a lot about existing apps, because in my experience, there are so many hidden functionalities in existing apps that it's quite difficult to capture all the functionality available in the application. What I do like about it, it will focus on the what and not as much on the how. So if I work with customers, and if I have a customer where the requirements are clear, where there are many business rules, but especially where there is a high demand for high traceability and high maintainability, this could be a very good option to consider. What I didn't show you, but what is also quite a nice feature of this approach, I can get the specifications and simply push and commit that, or commit and push that to version control, and fork it in different repositories, and come up with different plans, because that will give me an opportunity to go for the same specification with multiple different implementations, have them, for instance, even run on a cloud agent and investigate what kind of alternative fits the best for me. And if you don't have your requirements clear, you can always start using vibe coding to get your requirements clear, and then go into a more formal approach like this to do it in a well-documented way. So, to answer my question, is SpecKit the future of software development? Well, I'm an architect, and I say this a number of times a day. It depends. I think it's good. It has a good chance to actually be, it's promising. It's quite promising. And I know that there are a lot of people in the industry really focusing on it because they do see the added value, and so do I. Therefore, I would give a strong call to action for you to simply start experimenting with this. It will cost you a few tokens. I hope that you do have a corporate sponsor or something like that. But I really would advise you simply start experimenting with it. It's still an alpha, so don't start using it on a big new real project that you have because, well, it's still an open source project. It's still in alpha, so things might break. And coming to that, if things break, the team will really, really love it if you can simply add issues, because that's why it's open source. I can easily add an issue around agents, around feature requests. So there's a lot of things that I can do to simply contribute to this project, not by writing code, but also to share IDs. Well, I will check up about questions. Are there any questions from you? Or how does this, not even questions, do you like this?
To the audience, if you have any questions for Johan, please do feel free to ask in the chat section. Like I've already dropped the LinkedIn profile for Johan. You can connect with him. You can follow him up if you have further questions. Johan,
Yeah.
Thank you very much for these insightful sections. It was really, really inspiring. For the audience, the recording will be available on our YouTube channel, and it will be shared on our WhatsApp platform and across our social media like LinkedIn and all that. So thank you.
More than welcome. And do reach out if you have any questions. Do reach out through my socials. I'm always happy to chat about this subject or other things.
Okay, so thank you.
More than welcome.
Okay, so we'll be close. We're going to be, yeah, we'll be stopping the recording at this point. Thank you once again.
More than welcome.
Yeah.